as well, slightly.
Good stuff.
Okay. In our last podcast, we spoke about the effects of religion on our collective sense making. And if you remember, the conversation took us towards the realms of considering the roles of the political left and right. And we agreed that this is an area worthy of a deeper inquiry. So in the first half of this podcast, I'd like to ask your thoughts on how sense making manifests when a person is committed to either the left or right. And in the latter part, maybe we can suggest some tweaks or neutralizers that may be helpful with having such a partisan inclination. Because it seems to me that since the EU referendum in 2016 in the UK, the distinction of either being on or belonging to the left or the right has made it completely to the forefront of people's sense making. And it's now become a kind of lens through which you see the world, and also how you recognise others who see through that same lens. Now, even though in the UK we have a conservative government, which arguably isn't all that conservative at the moment, our institutions nevertheless are operated by left-leaning individuals by and large. The long march of the institutions has seen to this, and there are now loads of instances of leftist ideals driving things like cancel culture, like unconscious bias training, the gender pay gap and other, you'd say, closed-minded practices. And this is an issue that doesn't appear to be losing momentum, but indeed it seems to be gaining momentum. And as far as I can see, the outcome to any operational capture by one of these dual factions, I mean, it could be the right, but in this case it's not, it's the left, is that inevitably the governance of that institution produces a disproportion in the balance of moral diversity, and that only leads to a lopsided policy. Now, because the occupation of an institution by one faction produces this tribal thinking, and then in direct proportion then reduces, or sadly even vanquishes, open thinking, I'd like to ask you, Mike, how are we to come to terms with the fact that we actually require a cohort of moral diversity within our institutions to protect our institutions against keeling too far to one side and then eventually sinking?
Okay, so there's a lot in there that's really good for us to dig into. To begin with, when you say moral diversity,
diversity of thought.
Diversity, yeah, okay, yeah, because I think diversity of thought is closer to what I imagine, we really need. But okay, I was taking some notes while you were posing the question. So, we're talking about tribal thinking, something that I kind of call team sports thinking, the kind of team sports approach to politics.
Okay.
So let me pull back a second. There's a story that I really like from history about. I believe it was Queen Victoria, who was, I believe it was her. She was talking to one of her ministers, might have been her prime minister, and they were talking about foreign policy, and he was going through kind of the ups and downs of, who's with us, who's against us, what have you. And at some point, she referred to some foreign power that she had thought was friendly, and he indicated that that power was no longer on side, right? So apparently, according to the story, she gave a little huff of annoyance and she said, don't we have any permanent friends? And the minister said, no, ma'am, no permanent friends and no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. And I really like that story because when I started really kind of rethinking my politics, one of the things I had to do was kind of get away from this team sports approach to politics that you correctly identify as a problem, right? In other words, it's like I'm not on Team Democrat, right? I'm not on Team Republican. I have to pull back further and say, okay, wait a minute. What are my interests? What am I interested in? What do I think is important, right? This requires what I would call a foundationist approach to politics. What is politics for, right? What are your government representatives for? Why are they there, right? And what are you voting for them for? What is it that you sent them? What is the job you sent them to do? And I think even pulling back to that point is very helpful, or can be very helpful, because right away you stop looking at them. You stop looking at this. Okay, take the phrase identity politics. It's a funny phrase because people, it is understood to mean a politics that's based on one's personal identity, right? But what you just talked about, what you just pointed out, is also a kind of identity politics, in that it's politics at party politics as identity. Do you see what I'm saying? It's like,
Yes.
I am this. I'm a Tory. I'm a Tory voter. What? It's like, and I think to the extent we can get away from that, it'd be a good thing, right? So, why is this team sports approach to politics so closely held? Why is it so popular? I think one reason it's popular is because, maybe the main reason it's popular is because we've hollowed out we've hollowed out a lot of the centers of meaning from our lives, right? The family has been under attack for a long time. The workplace, as a place where men in particular find meaning in the world and find out who they are, okay, that's been hollowed out. The kind of the security and the camaraderie and all the things that people kind of justly expect from their work, from what they do every day, that's been hollowed out. And of course, religion's been hollowed out. And and because religion has been hollowed out, but because human beings are essentially fundamentally religious creatures, whether they want to admit it or not, okay, then we're going to lodge that meaning in some other place. I'm going to put that religious impulse has to have a target. People will find a target, and the target is party politics. So, in terms of, you talk about sense making, I think you really went right to the heart of it, right? Because I think we've talked before about the idea that, separate from whatever actual religious belief you have, this God or that, I don't care about that. The point is that you have to have a set of axioms, an aim point for your system of moral reasoning. Well, what happens when that aim point is a political party? Well, you have a real problem, right? Because then you're going to do just what you described. You're going to try to make moral sense of everything according to the aim point, which is, when you just say it out loud, it sounds ridiculous, because it is ridiculous. But people don't understand that is what they are doing. That they're kind of, and the moment you step back from that, by the way, you can see it happening all over the place. Look, in my country, right, in the United States, 5 seconds ago, okay, sexual harassment was this huge issue, and you should believe all women and men were these predators and this and that, and this was the problem with all this misogyny and stuff. And now we have, as opposed to someone who, spoke intemperately, in front of a hot mic on a bus about something he may or may not have done, grabbing women by the intimate parts, right? Here's someone who's been credibly accused by several people. We have a president now who was credibly accused by several people, okay, of actual sexual harassment in the workplace. You have a governor of New York State, my home state, who has also been credibly accused of sexual harassment by several people, and now it's no big deal, right? And that's not new to that's not new to like 2020, 2021, this political season. It's happened before, right? Where, on the one hand, we have, where, let me back up a second, where, because people are aligning their moral reasoning to their party affiliation, the party gets to get away with murder. And that's not a thing that is unique to the left. It's not as if the Republican Party is incapable of wrongdoing. That's obviously nonsense. And that's why, by the way, one of the reasons I started Foundationism was I really got tired of the whole team sports approach to politics. I knew the left had lost the plot. I knew the Democratic Party had lost the plot, but it didn't seem evident to me. In fact, I found no evidence that the political right, that the Republican Party had found the plot. They were both lost in the wilderness. So I wasn't going to align myself with either one. I had to find a different aim point, a different guide star, and go with that. And then figure out, okay, well, based on my permanent interests as a human being, okay, and as a citizen of the Republic, all right, based on that, who is my friend today? Who's my friend in Washington today? And I think the same thing, people, across the ocean, I think people in your country could benefit from doing the same thing. What are my permanent interests? You know what I'm saying? As a British subject or a British citizen, as a human being, as a family man or a family woman, as a business owner, as a father, as a mother, as a sister, as a brother. What are my permanent interests? And then based on those interests, who's my friend right now? Or who's at least not against me right now? And I say right now advisedly because that can change, right? Mm-hmm. So I'll pause there, but I think you're on the right track. This is a thing that's really happening. I'm glad to dig more deeply into it. Again, I keep harping on the whole Cold War theory of team sports and the Cold War idea of that being this conflict that really destroyed our ability to reason politically and morally. But I think it is in short, it's highly detrimental to our ability to make sense of the world, because you can't align your moral axioms, your system of moral axioms you can't align your system of moral reasoning toward a political party. A party is not an axiom. It's not something that's always correct. You just have to accept it's always, by definition, it is not that. So you will not be able to make sense of the world. And if you try to make sense in this way, you'll just, the result will be irrational behavior at best, and deeply undesirable outcomes for everyone at worst. So I'll pause there.
Yeah, I have been thinking about this just recently. We have a situation in local government at the moment in my area where the majority is Liberal Democrat and their party has been essentially obliterated. But because of the previous incumbent MP, who was a very, very hardworking man, and got elected, I think maybe for 14 years he was in place for as an MP. He stepped down just at the last election because he retired, and the Liberal Democrats put forward what you call an AWL, an all-women's list. So only women were allowed to contest the seat. I think I mentioned this to you before.
Yeah.
And because their party was so obliterated, but they're still in place in the local authority, they are a band of brothers. They're a group of people that are aligned politically, but their alignment has been undermined by what's happened to them on the national stage. Mm-hmm. They can't attract any talent, or I think they're finding it difficult to attract new talent to run for the May elections, the local elections in this May 2021. So they're in a position where they are making strong changes to the operations of the local authority, pretty much knowing that in the May elections they are going to be unseated, or their power is going to be greatly diminished. And I mean, out of 40 odd councillors, they represent more than 2/3. So we've got, and that makeup is going to change. And I was thinking about the Conservatives, who will probably do very well and the Labour, I do not think will do as well. They're in a similar position to the Liberal Democrats,
Mm.
but you have a few independent people, very, very few. But there's no way that any independent group, should you say, if you've got half a dozen independent people, they're not a political group. They are half a dozen independents, even if they are politically aligned. As you get in government and local government, they could align themselves with each other to hold a bit more sway.
Yeah.
But this gets to the heart of my point. How are we to get away from team thinking if the only option is to get into power, to join a team?
That's a great question. That's a great question. So I would say this. When I say get away from a team sports approach to politics, I don't mean eliminate political parties. I think people who talk about eliminating political parties are I think it's utopian to talk about doing that, right? Politics is complex because the state is complex, because society is complex, and therefore there's a lot of information to kind of sum up. And you could think of a political party as kind of a data compression method, right? It's a way of kind of summing up a lot of different issues and viewpoints into one kind of package. So there's nothing wrong with political parties as such, okay? But there is going to be a lot wrong from time to time with one political party or the other. So I'm not saying that people shouldn't join parties. I'm not saying people shouldn't form parties. In fact, the opposite. People should absolutely form political parties and align and realign or what have you. What I am saying is that as far as voters are concerned, or even separate from voting, I just, as far as citizens are concerned, okay, in order to be able to in order to have a shot at making sense of the world, we have to get away from making sense of the world by first looking at what party X or party Y thinks about such and such an issue. It's like, well, where are the Tories? If you need to know where the Tories stand on something to know where you should stand on it, then we got a problem. The idea is that given your stance on an issue, the question should be, well, what is the set of trade-offs that I'm going to make by casting my vote for this or that person of this or that party, okay, to kind of express my opinions and kind of advocate for my interests via the instrument of representative government. You see what I'm saying? It's like, the parties, no problem. The more, the merrier. It's just don't, identity politics. Don't lodge your identity in your political party affiliation. That's all I'm saying. If a Tory says something that's right on with what you believe, with what your core values are, excellent. If a Labor politician says something that's right on with what your values are, excellent. And size them up kind of ruthlessly and cold-bloodedly, and then make a decision. I think we have to get to that point. And ultimately, there are going to need to be more parties, more teams, if you will, precisely because the current teams have lost the plot, because people have become, well, let me back up a second. I was going to say that people have become so entrenched in their voting habits, but then again, Brexit gave the lie to that, because what we saw with the election of Boris Johnson, the last election, we saw a lot of people who were traditionally Labour move over to the Tory side. So actually, that was an instance in which the people of your country did exactly what I'm talking about, did exactly what I think citizens and voters should do. They didn't say, well, I'm a Labor voter, so that's no, they said, well, what's going on? Who's my friend today? Who's on my side on the issues I care about right now? And the people of your country, I think, people in a lot of traditional Labor regions sized it up and decided that Boris was that guy. Now, I don't think they were mistaken so much as that Boris Johnson didn't keep his promise, his implicit promise to them. And that's a whole separate problem. But I think that's the correct. And by the way, when I talk about this stuff, I'm not, I don't offer this with any guarantees. I'm not saying that if you size up your politics in this way, if you get away from team sports and you start to look at things in that way, I'm not guaranteeing any outcomes. There are no guaranteed outcomes in any kind of truly democratic politics. I'm just saying that you'll at least be able to make sense of what's going on, right? To push the point a little bit further, there are a lot of people who, traditional labor voters, okay, who voted Tory, all right, gave Johnson a majority, okay, and now they're thoroughly unhappy with Boris Johnson, right? Now, they might vote for him again if the only person standing up against him is a labor politician, right? Because why? Because they might correctly surmise that that Boris is bad, but labor is worse. Which, and you know something, that's how it is sometimes, right? Like, politics is always the lesser of some number of evils, or the least of some number. That's the game, right? So I'm not saying that if we do this, we're going to get all these great politicians who keep their promises. None of that. I'm saying that we will get away from the idea of party loyalty. I think it is the people who have ideals and interests, and it is the party that is supposed to be loyal to the people, not the voters to a party. That's a myth. That's a mistake. So I'll pause.
Yeah. I went through a couple of thought cycles whilst you were talking there. Initially, I thought to myself that there was a disconnect between imagining a world where people can look at their opportunity to vote on balance and not be partisan to one particular party, like automatically vote for them, and what that world will look like. Then you went on to talk about what happened in the UK in the last election, and perhaps that's what that actually does look like, that set of circumstances when huge amounts of people look at things that are perhaps more on balance, but they perhaps look at things in a populist term. What's going to be popular with them, their family, and their community. What set of policies are popular? I mean, populism, populists it's kind of got a bad name, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't really know why, because if something is popular with you and your friends and your community, there must be something going for it. If it's popular with just you, or maybe just you and your partner, or you and your best mate, no, I don't know about that. But if it's widely popular, then that's a good thing, especially in times of profound, polarization.
Well, let me just dig into that for a little bit, if you don't mind.
Please.
So, I mean, I would say this. First of all, the reason, populism has gotten a bad name from elites. It's the elite. It's not the people who are bad talking populism. It's the elites. Why? Well, because they are elites. They understand, that they are the useless few and we're the useful many. That's why. And the only conspiracy I ever kind of acknowledge is that's the only conspiracy I really think is worth paying attention to. QAnon, all that stuff, please forget about it. It's the useless few versus the useful many. Okay. And so it's not surprising to me that, news organizations, for example, find populism terrifying. Right. Now, here's the thing. Is there an aspect of populism that can be troubling? Well, of course. I mean, in other words, the Greeks rightly feared the mob. The Romans feared the mob. Anyone in government who is sensible, anyone in or out of government who is sensible fears the mob. Okay. But we're not talking about the mob. And by the way, the same people, okay, who bad talk populism, okay, and who are saying, oh, this guy is a populist and that's a problem. Nigel Farage is a populist. So and so is Donald Trump was a populist. So and so. The very people who bad talk populists simply because they are populists, right? We shouldn't deceive ourselves that those people are actually bad talking them because they fear the mob. We know that's not true, because those same people, all right, have no problem with the mob when it's holding up signs saying certain things. Black Lives Matter, for example. They have no problem with a violent mob who's holding up signs saying certain things. They obviously have no problem with violent mobs setting fire to major cities in my country, okay, over the course of a summer, okay, behind their nonsense ideas. You see what I'm saying? So I'm populism is one thing, the mob is something else. But it's also true that that the people who decry populist politicians just because they are populist are mostly hypocrites, from what I can tell, at least in this current kind of political cycle. Right. Exactly. Now, again, it's not to say that all populists have good ideas. We're not talking about their ideas right now. It's like a populist is just as full of it as everybody else, okay, in terms of his ideas. He's got to be judged on the basis of those ideas. But goddamn, if there is something to be said for a populist being someone who is at least willing to bring things into the open that nobody else wants to talk about. And I think, separate from whatever solutions they come up with or whatever ideas they have, the fact is that the fact that we have so many of our official people in Washington or in number 10 Downing or wherever, right, refuse to say what everyone can see, refuse to just acknowledge baseline reality. Okay.
No, they do.
Well, that's a problem. And we shouldn't be surprised if a populist politician, we shouldn't be surprised, by the way, in an atmosphere like that, if a populist comes to power or comes to popularity without necessarily having the greatest ideas. Let me back up a second. People in the establishment, elites, for example, make a rod for their own backs. They make an opening for populists with bad ideas, okay, by infuriating the population with their kind of seeming denial of what everyone can see is obvious. Do you see what I'm saying?
Unfortunately, not everyone.
Well, not everyone what?
Not everyone can see that it's obvious, unfortunately.
Well,
that's how they get away with it.
Well, but now here's the thing, though. I don't know about that. It's like everyone, look, I mean, yes, there's a diversity of political opinion on the ground in, say, your country. But most people can understand, how can I, let me jump back across the Atlantic to my country. Okay. So Donald Trump became president partly on the back of a populist appeal. And the interesting thing about that populist appeal was that it didn't have a lot of deep ideas in it. Do you see what I'm saying? I think people who, even people who were very much, Trump fans would admit that it didn't have a lot of deep ideas in it. Here's what I can see, from looking at things on the ground here, from talking to friends of mine who supported Trump. I didn't, but I have friends who did, and from talking to them, I really get the sense that people were just delighted that he just admitted things that everyone knew was going on anyway. For a long time, we had people, again, coming off the back of the Cold War. Okay, we had people who were rah for capitalism, rah for globalization. Okay, and people in the big red center of my country were getting screwed over by big capital and by globalization. Okay, I mean, they were seeing the life sucked out of their communities. by these trends, okay? And official Washington and the official news media were just, they'd kind of drone on in these, kind of NPR tones about, oh, we're living in a global society and trade, blah, 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 and like from both sides of the political spectrum, okay, left and right were doing the same thing, okay? And this guy, this hick, this rube, right? This political outsider, Donald Trump, showed up and said, "Hey, man, you guys got screwed by this globalism thing." And people are like, "Thank you, at last." Say someone is at least willing to admit what we can obviously see is going on.
They were, but for every person that could see what was going on and thanked Donald Trump for pointing it out, there was another person that either couldn't see what was going on or failed to recognise, was in denial. Same with Brexit. That's the dichotomy of the culture, isn't it?
Well, yes, but that's fine. That's fine. In other words, here's the thing. I'm not saying that for any given political cycle, you're only going to have one populist, right? So Donald Trump was a populist for people who felt that the whole globalization project and the whole liberalization project had gone too far. Okay. Yes. Now, people who were in denial about globalization didn't need some new populist to come on the scene. They had all of official Washington speaking for them. Do you see what I'm saying? In your country, people who, it's not like there's some shortage of people in the BBC, okay, who believe in open borders and who believe in the EU project. So if you were a British citizen in the middle of the Brexit debate and you were a Remainer, you wanted to stay in the EU, you didn't have to worry about you weren't there was no shortage of people to speak for you. Everyone was speaking for you, okay? But if you were some British person in some village in the center of the country somewhere, and you thought that, hey man, this is kind of a problem, yes, we can have immigration, but what the hell? Why are you dumping hundreds of people in these small towns and expecting everything just to go well? We think this is an issue. If you were a person like that, okay, if you were a person who dared to have a St. George's cross hanging on your property somewhere, okay, then you didn't have anyone speaking for you. If you were someone who dared to be proud of your country, to be proud to be an Englishman, to be proud to be whatever, to be a royalist maybe, and to be in love with certain traditions, okay, of family life and civic life and what have you. If you were someone who felt like he shouldn't walk around apologizing for himself all the goddamn time, there was no one to speak for you.
Moreover, there was no one to speak for those people, but they were demonized by the people that were.
Thank you. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I'm not saying that you're going to have one populist. I'm saying the people, as far as I'm concerned, the people in the city of London, and the people who are all fully on board with the whole globalization project, the people who don't care where they live and don't have that necessarily deep sense of place in the way that like a Kentish countrymen might have. Okay, yeah, man, those people are good to go. Okay, they have their representatives not only in government but also in the media. It's the other people who had no one to speak for them, and you could see how excited they were when someone finally did, and the hunger for that was so strong that Nigel Farage was able to get a Claire Fox and an Ann Widdecombe on the same stage at the same event. Okay, talking to the same group of people. That's how deep this thing goes. So that's, to me, I'm optimistic about this because I feel like this is the kind of thing, the Brexit party and that whole ferment around Brexit was so exciting to me politically, precisely because that's the kind of thing that can happen when people get off the team sports wagon and start looking at, well, who's my friend today and what have you. And by the way, the result that doesn't, you're not always going to get great results. A win is not guaranteed, but now we have some uncertainty, and that's a good thing. Go on, I'm sorry.
No, that's perfect, and that segues really nicely into how I think we should pick up the second half of the podcast and explore some ways in which we can possibly protect ourselves against falling into a super partisan mindset and then keeling away from the balance of good sense making, because we just identified these institutional parties that have their they're partisan people, they have their subscriptions, they have people that are always going to vote for them. And then Nigel Farage comes along. There's an appetite for that kind of rhetoric, and that's another pool, that's another team to follow. Yeah. So I think the logic still applies. The logic of the question still applies, even when someone like Nigel Farage emerges. Yeah. One of the things I've been thinking about a lot lately is the experience of being wrong, and I've been reminding myself that, of course, in no way do I know everything, and you know, the probability is that I actually know hardly anything for sure, you know, even down to how exactly and specifically I make up my mind one way or the other. But having said that, I was talking to our mutual friend Seb the other day. Shout out to Not the BBC podcast here on YouTube. That one of the only experiences I know of which I'm confident is a lasting truth is that when I take an opportunity to help a person who's in need of help, and it could be like lifting a piece of furniture, it could be taking a parcel in, it could be giving them a bit of your time when they want to chat, anything like that. In my experience, the result is always a feeling of positivity and connection. And I believe that these acts of kindness kind of nourish us, they nourish the soul, and they help to almost recalibrate the moral pendulum away from judgment and closer to forgiveness. And I use the word forgiveness here quite precisely because when a person's in need, you know, physically or psychologically, it's really easy to judge that person on the basis of what you would look at as a lack of capability in that instance. And it's easy to fool yourself into thinking that you are essentially more capable than they are and not in need of the same help, be it like self-help or from another person. So I wanted to ask you, given that we can be sure that our sense making is replete with errors, how are we to remain humble in our actions and our reactions?
Oh, that's a great question, and I believe it or not, I have a ready answer. The answer is scale. Okay, this is a question of scale. All right. And the reason I'm so ready for an answer is maybe partly because of what I do for a living. I'm a software engineer. Yeah. And so which means a lot of my life is spent debugging things, right? I'm designing software, writing software, debugging software. Debugging software is a process. It's an iterative process in which you repeatedly come up with hypotheses. In debugging, you come up with sometimes a very large number of hypotheses, all but the last of which is wrong by definition. Okay. Yes. So I'm wrong about 500 times a day, right? And literally in my career, when I began to be a much better, when I began to go from being a competent software developer to being a really good software developer, was when I started to realize that I could be faster and more productive, and my defect rates would go down if I shrunk the size of my hypotheses, and I kind of did everything at a much smaller scale, so that my hypotheses would be smaller, so I could find out that I was wrong faster, so that my stupid ideas would die an even earlier death than they had before. Do you see what I'm saying? Okay. So I was taking notes as you were speaking, because you said some things that went right to the heart of things. You mentioned being wrong. You mentioned helping people. Now, this is often a problem because in the current political debate, there's a lot of back and forth between people who ostensibly want to help people, and we can class those people as largely kind of political left, right? Who kind of style themselves as being the people who want to help, okay? And the people who are often unfairly maligned as not caring about people, namely people on the right. Again, I say largely unfairly maligned.
Can I just specify that I was talking about individual instances of selfless acts, you know.
I understand that, but I'm getting
selfless acts at large.
Yeah, but I'm getting to that. Yeah, but I'm getting to that in a second. Okay. So now the thing is that, you see, the first thing is that selfless acts can typically, well, what does selfless mean? If you're an individual being selfless, then you're putting someone else before yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But the acts of a government, okay, are also selfless. But they're selfless in a different way.
Yes.
They're selfless in that there is not a person, there's not any one person doing this thing to you. If the government may issue a warrant for your arrest, and a person who has a self may show up to arrest you, but that person is just an instrument. It doesn't matter who that person is. The self is taken
the
out.
accolade or the culpability is not going to rest on one person.
On one person, exactly. Okay. And the flip side of that is that government tends to be blind to the individual. Okay. It looks at patterns, and why? Because government is distant. Okay. Government is it's very big and it's very distant, and it can't know, number 10 Downing Street can't know what's happening on your street. It just is not capable of that. That's not what government is. Okay. So I think that the same formula, okay, works in both spheres that we've been talking about. We started talking kind of more in the political sphere, right, at a large scale, and then most recently you were talking about the personal scale.
Yeah.
But the same pattern applies in both places, which is why I'm kind of tying the two together, which is namely that one has to scale down one's ambitions. And one has to, when I say ambitions, I mean specifically concerning helping people and being,
That's
right?
What I'm getting at. Yeah.
Exactly. In other words, because helping people, really helping them, is close in precision work. Okay.
Mm.
If I have a friend who's broke all the time, okay, well, I could quote unquote help him by just giving him money, right? But then the question is, why is he broke all the time? Does he have a gambling problem? Does he have a drug problem? Okay. And it could be that if I just give him money in the belief that I'm helping him, what I'm doing is I'm making the problem worse, because I'm just feeding his habit. I have to get in there close and find out what's going on. And by the way, there are no guarantees there. He may not allow me to get, even if we're friends, he may not allow me to get that close. He may not be ready to confront his own problems. He may not see that bottom coming up at him fast enough. Okay. He may say, yeah, man, you just, please, Mike, get out of my face. I want to do this, what have you. So you don't know that. And that's also what helping people means, is that understanding is understanding that you may not be able to help some people. And you have to be ready for that, right? But what I'm saying is you got to scale your ambition down. It's like, okay, can I get in and help solve this one problem? And maybe the fact that my friend is always broke is a problem of a certain size. Can I solve a much smaller problem? It's going to be different for different people, and that's fine. But that's the thing. It's like, I think a lot of us become embittered and disillusioned and disappointed because we set our sights, we set the target area too big, and then we're kind of surprised when things fall apart, when things fail, when it doesn't work. It's like you're going to try to help people 10 times, and maybe 9 of those times it's not going to work, and that's okay, because of course you're not supposed to be helping people to be thanked. You're not supposed to be trying to help people in order to succeed in helping them. You're supposed to try to help people because that is the correct thing to do on the merits, period. Mm. Now, as far as government is concerned, it is good that we have, for example, a social safety net, so that a little bit of bad luck or a workplace injury doesn't send an entire family into the abyss of kind of starvation and destitution. That is a good thing. It's a good thing for a wealthy nation to do that. But if you go beyond that, if the government goes beyond that to deciding that it must somehow find a way to intercept and prevent all bad outcomes in family life, what you will have is a totalitarian government, or one that begins to edge towards it, one that begins to be intrusive in people's lives in a way that is not bearable. And then you also have a government that increasingly is taking from people who are getting up every day doing what they're supposed to do and redistributing that wealth to people who, for one reason or another, are not doing what they're supposed to. Now, some of those people are genuinely just the victims of bad luck. Some of those people are people who really do need to get it together in their lives. Again, it's impossible for a government to know. This back to the idea of helping people being close in precision work. Governments are distant, and distance is the enemy of precision. So,
and there is a huge encroachment, isn't there, at the moment, from exactly what you say. The helping people is close precision work, and governments are at a distance. But the government is now telling us in both our countries that we are. This is essentially what they're telling us. Subtext that we are not to help people.
Correct. You are actually.
See that lady down the road that could do with her grass cutting? You're not allowed to go around there.
Exactly. You're not. Think about that. You're not allowed. The churchmen of England. You are not allowed to minister to the sick. Isn't that something? Yeah. Isn't that something? That's I have to say that's new. You know what I'm saying? And it's to me it's intolerable. It's an insult. Okay.
It's an abomination. It's all of those things. Any pejorative you can think of. It's all of those things all wrapped up into one. It's the worst thing we've encountered. Being told by our government that we're no longer permitted to help other people.
That's correct.
In the way that we see fit.
That's correct. So this is something that you have to fight to the limit of your strength. Otherwise, you're lost. I mean, I don't know any plainer way to say it. It's like I don't like alarmism and what have you. And, I don't like people always saying the end is nigh. I don't think the end is necessarily nigh, but I do think that when something like this shows up, like, I'm sorry, you have to fight this. Some things are just wrong and they're always going to be wrong. And this is just wrong. This is bad and evil. And I don't, it doesn't mean that I think Boris Johnson is evil. I don't care. It doesn't matter at this point whether Boris Johnson is evil. It doesn't matter. It actually does not matter whether Matt Hancock is evil. It doesn't matter whether George Soros and Bill Gates. It doesn't matter whether it does not matter. I don't care. Okay? This is wrong. You have to fight it now or you are lost as human beings.
And there's a strange relationship between what we've been speaking about for the last 10 minutes. There's a great quote. I can't remember who said it. That's morality is what you do when you think nobody is looking.
I was watching, right? Yeah.
Right, and that is what I'm saying about the feeling I get when I do something for someone who is in need of help, and it's only myself and that person that will ever know about that small thing.
Right.
But now may be the time to have your morality on show a little bit more and be a little bit more brash with your actions and your wishes on how to. I'm struggling for the words because it's so alien to me to have to think in this way, to have to figure out how I display what is obvious in my behavior. And I don't, if there are people protesting yesterday, that's how they've done it in London. They've gone out in London, but how do I put into my behavior what yesterday was already there? How do I display the characteristics of someone that is for freedom, for liberty, for helping people, for having people do what they want with their lives within reason? When I thought that was completely axiomatic up until yesterday.
Well, here's the thing. I would say that maybe showing it is not the priority. I would say living it is the priority. But the key is that to do it and make it stick in the current political climate, you have to do it in concert with other people. That is to say, you have to figure out like who's in your network, who can you trust. And we are going to go deliver groceries to people who are homebound, or we're going to go and minister to the sick, or we're going to go, and we're going to
Isn't it wrapped up in dissent though, Mike? Do we not have to figure out a way to dissent against this madness?
That is a way to dissent against that
in
madness.
concert with other people, as you say.
That's exactly what I'm saying. That is dissent, right? I mean, listen, if a government tells you that you may not minister to the sick, then ministering to the sick is a form of dissent. Exactly.
Right on, yeah. Yeah, it's mad to think of it, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that's it. So in other words, and the thing is that, look, you want to make sure, like, if they come for you, you want to make sure the cameras are running, of course. Because again, these people are savages. So if they come for you, you got to make sure the cameras are on, and you got to make sure you got to try to find strength in numbers, because we've also seen that they're savages, but they're also kind of cowards. So it's like, they're not going to go after the Black Lives Matters of the world. They're not going to go after those. They're going to go after, a bunch of veterans defending the cenotaph. They're going to go after them.
Cowardice prohibits them from tackling Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, exactly. They're not going. They'll tackle an 80-year. Some little shit who's decided to graffiti a public monument. They're going to treat him with kid gloves. They're going to tackle an 80-year-old woman to the ground or something like that. That's what they do. That's how they do.
Oh, it's going on all the time. There was a lady, the police turned up at her door. She's in shelter accommodation. She's in her 80s. They turned up at her door because she had a cup of tea with a friend in her garden.
Exactly, right. Okay, so that's how they are. And by the way, they're not going after criminal gangs either. The robbers, the rapists, the muggers, the home invaders, okay? The grooming gangs, they get kid gloves, okay? So we see, and this is, again, and I'm, by the way, I'm calling out Cressida Dick in this podcast. It's like, you know what I'm saying? Like, as useless a so-called civil servant as I've ever seen on either side of the Atlantic Ocean, for real. Okay. But that's how they are. You know what I'm saying? And of course, they're going to retreat into some cowardly, stupid rhetoric about female empowerment and what have you. No one ever talks all that nonsense when it comes to things that matter in their own lives. It's like, you care if you need to go for surgery. You care if the surgeon, knows how to do his or her job. That's it. You want the best person to do your triple bypass surgery. Period.
It's when the rest of us say that.
What'd you say?
The dental work that I've had this week. Somebody asked me, said, was he a friendly guy? I said, actually, as an aside, he was quite friendly, but that's not what I was interested. I was interested in, is he bloody good at his job? Because he's putting titanium pins into my jawbone. I want to know that he knows what he's doing.
Correct. Okay. So it's only when you, and this is the thing, about the useless few versus the useless, the useless few versus the useful many. They're perfectly happy, okay, to come up with all these dumb standards for evaluating job performance when you have to live with the consequences of someone who can't do their goddamn job properly. So you have to live with a police commissioner and a police force that does not know how to chase down criminals and investigate and close cases, and get dangerous people off the street. You have to deal with that, but they can sit and say, oh, well, it's such a, really, Cressida Dick really strikes a blow for, female empowerment, because they know that, look, if you're tucked away in number 10 Downing, it's like no criminal gang is going to come up in there. You're not worried about home invasions, in other words, if you're in government lodgings, put it that way, or if you're in more expensive places that have better security. It's just the rest of the great unwashed have to worry about that. So I know I'm digressing a little bit, but going back to what we were talking about, how does one embody this spirit? Well, you embody the spirit by moving as the spirit moves you. That's how. It's like, what do I want to do? What's the thing? Who am I going to help today? Maybe no one. Maybe you're going to do something else. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe you're going to go for an extra run. Whatever. But whatever the case is, I think the main thing to do is be righteous and to find your strength in numbers. Networking is the number one thing, because again, you're going to have strength in numbers. The number one weapon of the useless few against the useful many is to make the useful many feel isolated. If the useful many don't know how numerous they are, okay, then they're likely to think, wow, I'm surrounded, right? Now that's a trick. That is a trick, okay? The very small army can make a larger force feel like it's surrounded. That is known as a trick, okay? And that actually has some history in military. I think there was a General Lee at Chancellorsville, divided his force. He was outnumbered, but he divided his force, which is usually a military no-no, and he made the other force think that his army was bigger than it was. Okay, that is a trick. So, and all of this, by the way, the attacks against common sense. Okay, the overhyped racial rhetoric about everything, the overhyped gender rhetoric about everything. Okay, the kind of the obvious stupidity of some of the things that government people say as a matter of course these days. Okay, things like trans women are really women. Okay, things uttered by people who, based on their track record, based on their performance, shouldn't be listened to when they say anything, including good morning. And yes, I'm talking about the mayor of London. Trans women are women. Yeah, how's knife crime? Huh? Like how? No, I mean, can you get a handle on that? How are the home invasions this month? You see what I'm saying? So you see, and those people are not more numerous than you. That is not the problem. You are not surrounded. The country has not fallen. That is not what's going on. What's happening is that a very small number of people, okay, have a number of network connected microphones and video cameras, and they can make you think that their bullshit is everywhere. It's not. Most people have more sense than that. I'm sorry?
I mean, that is correct. They are a network of people that, have a platform, have a media platform, but they also are in place now. They're in place in the institutions, and to usurp these people, we need some kind of either reversal, retrofit, re-engineering, and then we're back to this wait a minute. We spoke about of the kinetic warfare.
No. Look, first of all, you said usurp. That's wrong. Remember, you hired these people. It's like this is what we have to remember this. You hired these people to do a job. Okay, are they doing a good job? Okay, then that's a problem. It's like it's not usurpation at all. You hired someone to build an addition onto your house. The thing is falling down and the roof leaks. Okay, so, I'm sorry, I can't use you. I'm very sorry. I'll have to find someone else. That's all. Now, here's the thing.
It's longer than that, isn't it? I mean, the long march in institutions, it's a long march, isn't it?
Wait a minute. One thing at a time. Again, it's not usurpation. These are people you hired to do a job, and the question is, are they doing a good job? That's question one. Okay, now question two about the institutions. That's a different matter. Okay. Yes, the institutions have been hijacked by people with a given political agenda. So
it's a group.
So one must do some. Okay, so one must. But see that group is not as coherent as you might think it is.
And we've spoken about this before, and I'm not. I do know what you're saying, but I'm not completely convinced. It seems coherent.
Wait a minute. No, it doesn't. In other words, looked at correctly, no, it doesn't seem coherent, because what's the first thing that happens when lefties are eating each other all the time? But
that's their mode, isn't it?
So then they're not coherent then. If you recognize that that's their mode, then what that means is that is a tactical opportunity for you. That's what that says to me. If I know the enemy army, okay, has dissension in the ranks, if I know that it doesn't take much, I can drop a few pamphlets and all of a sudden they turn on each other and start shooting each other, then that's good for me. I can exploit that. Now, how to exploit that is a separate question. And I'm not giving anyone any guarantees. I'm not saying victory is around the corner. I'm not saying that. I'm saying this is the order of battle. This is the disposition of forces. These are the strategic and tactical openings available to you. If you can exploit them, then you've got a shot. If not, then not. That's what I'm saying. But there is no question that one, you outnumber the enemy. 2, the enemy is not as united as he might want you to think. And 3, you can turn both those things to your advantage. How you do that is a separate matter. What I'm asserting is that it is doable. That's all.
Okay. I am with you, and perhaps my terminology with usurp is incorrect, because I'm not a side person, and I don't mean that that's a side that needs to be kind of taken away and supplanted, legally or whatever. But what I do think is it's something that needs to be dislodged. It's a group think that needs to be dislodged.
Yes.
And from its hold.
Yes. Yes.
And yes, it is made up of individuals that have their own agendas, and yes, they are bickering with each other, but they still have top positions, management positions, middle management positions, and certain positions under that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more of a wholesale occupation that they've got at the moment, and we're not talking about just the private sector,
mm-hmm.
Which has its trousers down to every kind of woke agenda going, because it's just cheap to do it. It's very cheap to get on the woke agenda. It's not very cheap to fight against this crap.
Yes.
We're also talking about the NHS.
Yes.
We're also talking about every large institution, the BBC, the NHS, So
yes.
This is the conundrum and the problem, and this is why I think when we are in accord with each other, when you talk about this being a war of sorts,
yes,
and although that language does bristle a bit with me, I cannot help but think that if you're not in that mindset, then you're going to be rolled over, because we are being rolled over.
Correct.
At the moment.
Correct. Look, they have no problem. I mean, they have no problem. So far, for example, I haven't said that we need to get kinetic with this war. I haven't advocating for burning down cities.
No.
They have.
Yes.
I mean, so I'm ready. I'm ready for any and all comers to get up in my face and talk about, well, Carbon Mike said that you're in a war, and that's like, oh yeah, okay. It's like, show me where I've said that you need to go and destroy public property as a matter of prosecuting this war. That's your tactics, not you personally, but you know what I mean. The people on the left, right? It's like that. So I don't want to hear nothing from nobody on that front. But going back to what you said, you're dead on target, right? So here's what I'm thinking is that we have to go back to the whole kind of viral theory of warfare, which is that it is possible to infiltrate and undermine a real, tangible organization through the viral propagation of ideas. The best example of this was the kind of dismantling of the Roman Empire from within by Christianity. That's probably the best example that I can think of. I mean, there are others. I mean, you could argue that the Long March through the institutions was another kind of viral takeover. Okay, well, all that tells me is that that can function in the opposite direction. Okay, so I want to talk about practical solutions, because I know you do have that focus. Okay, so
yes.
The first thing is, well, again, of course, networking. We got to network. We have to build our own networks, right? We have to not rely on monolithic services like Twitter. That's one. But then more importantly, what are we doing in these networks? Well, one is that we have to go back to the foundations, to the roots of things. We have to get away from team sports and politics. We have to talk about, okay, we have to realize that we have been embracing a neoliberal, big capital agenda that is really kissing cousins with big socialism / communism. They are not the opposite of each other. They're not. Okay. They both want to centralize things. They both want to use human beings as instruments. They both instrumentalize the sacred human being, and that's bad. I think that to start off, When you're building your troops, okay, you have to talk about this stuff in a righteous way. Conservatives, people on our side of the argument, have to be better at recruitment. We are terrible at recruitment. The left is saying we're going to save the planet, we're going to re-engineer, we're going to dismantle capitalism, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do it. It gets people so fired up with that rhetoric, okay, that those same people kind of ignore the actual outcomes, right? And kind of gloss over the actual sorry, cynical outcomes. I'll give you a brief example. One of the founders of Black Lives Matter, Patrisse Cullors, right, just inked a very lucrative deal with Warner Brothers. Right? This is the same person. It's the same person who wanted to overthrow capitalism 5 seconds ago. Huh? It's the same person who said, oh, the cis hetero patriarchal, and white people this and we're going to overthrow capitalism. Warner Brothers signed a deal with her for her to be some either a consultant or a showrunner or some goddamn thing. Okay, the law firm that negotiated the deal with for her, I believe it's called HJTH. It's a very fancy downtown Beverly Hills law firm. They got 2 floors of an office building. They got their own art gallery. Did she give them a lecture about having more black people on the partner track? I looked at their website. They have one black person is a partner, and he looked lonely. But I mean, what I'm saying is, she didn't lecture them about diversity in their law firm. That's not. I bet you what she went in there and sat down and shut her mouth and let them negotiate the deal for her. But what I'm saying is the left is so good at firing people up with their rhetoric that the same people just don't look at the outcomes at all. Most people don't know that Patrisse Cullors, the trained Marxist, did that. Is fully in bed with the capitalist pigs. Okay, so we have to get better at recruitment, better at rhetoric. Okay, we have to get back to the foundation, get away from the team sports thing. Don't go down the road of rah capitalism, because capitalism is an instrument. It's not the be all end all. All right, the economy is for something. It exists. What is it for? What is the economy for? What are profits for? What is this system we built? What is it for? And I like to think that it is for human flourishing, but that presupposes an idea of the human ideal. Okay? And we can be better than them on this from day one, because they want to start with the ideal human. They're utopians. That's the point. And the point is that if the human isn't ideal already, they're gonna snip and cut and amputate and fold, spindle, and mutilate the human into their kind of image of what a person should be, and then everything will happen well in their system. In our system, the human being is sacred to begin with. That's an axiom, and we go from there. Now, we get better at recruitment, better at rhetoric. Okay, and we figure out who is on the fence, who can be convinced. A lot of young people can be convinced. They have a sense of they're especially sensitive to injustice or perceived injustice. Yeah. And what they sense correctly is that it simply isn't good enough for us to just say, in response to the dumb rhetoric coming from Black Lives Matter, that there's no problem with police brutality, for example. Or that there's no problem with racism, or that, Britain is the least racist country in the world, or America is the least racist. Now, here's the thing. America, I, as a black person, really do think that America is the best possible place in the world for me to be living right now. Absolutely. But I have to have something better than that to say to a young person who I want to bring to my side. I have to have in this, because look, in the same sense that Trump was so popular and Farage was so popular because he made comfort noise, because he talked about things that people could see, in front of their faces, and he at least was not in denial. It didn't mean he didn't have to have great solutions for everything. He just talked about what everyone could see was real. In that same sense, okay, I think young people who are on the fence want to hear from someone who maybe isn't on that dumb leftist agenda that makes everyone nervous. Because let's face it, let's be honest, man. If you're a young person on that side, on the Black Lives Matter side, especially if you're not black, but even if you are black, you're always watching yourself. Am I going to say the wrong thing? Is someone going to, well, it's like, you can't laugh openly. You can't be in the presence of someone who makes a joke. You have to, is the music I listen to acceptable? Is it? So, so we have a better system. In our system, you don't have to be nervous all the time because someone made a joke. Someone made a joke. It wasn't funny. It wasn't funny. Someone takes offense. They take offense. Maybe you'll have an argument about it. That's fine. We don't have to cancel anybody. And therefore, we don't have to be worried that we're going to be canceled. Our side is better in that sense. But we have to do a better job at convincing them. No. We're not glossing over the real problems of history. You can be proud of England, proud of the UK, and nonetheless acknowledge that, y'all were some rough old cats back in the day. And y'all were rough on black people back. It's okay. It's okay. You see what I'm saying? So
yeah, well, that's yeah.
Same thing with me. Same thing with my country. It's like I have a real problem with obviously the leftist agenda, but I also have a real problem with the Candace Owenses of the world. Because their rhetoric is stupid and ugly and insulting to people who it is very easy to get on side. I spend a lot of time with working class black folks who are very, very conservative, who are to the right of Genghis Khan on some issues. They don't want to hear from Republicans. They don't want to hear nothing from Republicans. Why? Because they feel disrespected, and they are right to feel disrespected. Okay? So better recruitment, more optimism, radical optimism. That is optimism that goes to the roots. Okay? Better talking points, all right? And some idea about where to go. It is not good enough to stand athwart history yelling stop. That's not good enough. It's not good enough to simply talk about the free market. That's not good enough. The enemy is saying we're going to save the world. What's your answer? Accounting is going to save the world? Markets are going to save the world? No, that's not going to work. And it's not, by the way, don't take my word for it. Is it working? Obviously not. Okay? So, again, in my country, most recently, we had an election stolen by the Democratic Party at a time when the Republicans were, backslapping and high-fiving simply because Donald Trump got all the way up to 15, 20% of the black vote. As wrong as the Democrats have been about everything, the Republicans should be averaging more like 30, 40% of the black vote. Okay, and the fact that they haven't is on them. Don't tell me that it's because black people want free stuff. I don't want to hear that. That's part of the problem. You see what I'm saying? So I know I'm all over the place, but I'll bring it back in. At the end of the day, we can make progress on this. You got to recruit better. You got to network better. Okay, you got to spread the word better. You got to have better responses and better talking points. All right. And you have to get back down to the roots. What do we believe in? And it has to be something more noble and meaningful than the goddamn free market. That doesn't cut. A market is an instrument. OK, it's a way of it is literally it's a network. It's an internet. And listen, I'm a man of the internet. I love the internet. I love networks. OK, but that's all it is. There's no meaning in there. The meaning has to come from us. We have to get back down to the foundation of the sacred human ideal. And then everything comes from that. And we can do that. We have, as I almost tell Christians, just like Jesus Christ, you people especially, my Christian friends, goddamn, you have it. It's written down. So, it's like, it's one thing to talk about heathen like me, but it's like y'all have a book. So get on it. So anyway, I'll pause there.
No, man, I think that's the script for the next podcast then. Recruitment and first principles and foundationism. Let's go there.
Let's go there. That sounds good to me.
This is quite a nice progression. Mate, I'm learning a lot. I love it. Love talking to you. I do hope that other people that are listening are appreciating our little chats. They are genuine. We are friends from across the pond.
That's right.
So, we're not two people that have got anything other than admiration for a good chat and exploring ideas. And that's what we like to see in other people. And Long may it continue, mate. Long may it continue.
Hey, same here, man. I really appreciate you.
Yeah.
It's a real pleasure, talking
And
with you like
it'd
this.
be good to see other people do this. I mean, why not? If you find
Yeah.
a person you can rat along with, then spark up a YouTube channel and rat along with them, put a description there. Someone might get something out of it.
Well,
Why
that's right.
not?
That's right. And what I would say is, by all means, start a YouTube channel, but by all means, also archive your own content and figure out how to publish it on, in a way other than YouTube. So don't rely on
Hmm.
any one channel. And we
Right.
talk a lot about this. I mean, as you know, because you're a user in my private chat room in the Foundation of Society chat room. Um, we talk about this all the time. How can we find better ways to get content out there so that we're not relying on any one thing? The Foundation of Society chat room itself is a private chat room that I spun up because I was just sick of Facebook censorship, Twitter censorship, what have you, and anyone can do that. So thanks
Well,
again,
no
for
problem, man.
for doing this, and can't wait to the next conversation.
Mate, always a pleasure. Take good care of yourself, and I will see you, listen to you, hear you next time.
All right, brother, take care.
Cheers, mate. Ta-ra.